Good evening, everyone, wherever you join us from today. So today we back again with Anson, and it's gonna be a fantastic one. I can assure you that because we are all fired up for this session, right? So if you are here today, I want to say a big congratulations to you. Yeah, a big congratulations to you because this is gonna help you in your PA journey, because you need this to thrive. And we have no other person than James Dean. So, James is an experienced, confident, and motivated business analyst with over 7 years of experience across diverse domains, including corporate and business registries, life sciences, and energy, right? James is dedicated to advancing best practices within the business analysis profession. He has a strong passion for helping individuals transition into business analysis roles. He works closely with business analysis professionals at all stages of their careers. He offers coaching, mentoring, and practical guidance to help BAs refine their skills and overcome challenges in today's fast evolving landscape. Specializing in requirement elicitation, like I used to say, we don't use requirement gatherings, so we're learning. Requirement elicitation, process modeling, process optimization, and requirement analysis. Jeremy is known for his ability to simplify complex concepts. So James is giving us a simple, simplicity makes it good. So making them more accessible for better understanding. It leads workshops and consultations focusing on real world scenarios to help professionals enhance their practical skills and apply them effectively in the workplace. Pardon me. James holds a Bachelor of Science, and also earned ECBA entry certificate in business analysis and agile analysis certificate from IBA. So, James is professional Scrum product owner, certification from Scrum.org. As president of the International Institute of Business Analysis Ireland chapter, James plays a key role in shaping chapter strategies, organizing events, and mentoring fellow professionals. He was a finalist for the 2024 IBA Volunteer of the Year Award. Outside of work, James is a beautiful dancer. So I'm happy to have James here today. And James, thank you for coming to Dobac. We we are happy to have you here. And over to you,
Thank you.
James.
Thanks so much, David, and team. It's great to be here. So really, really excited for this session. I don't think I need to do my intro slide now because David has just covered like my whole kind of life there and my certification sessions. But let's crack on. So I'm going to share my screen and we will get into use cases and scenarios. Okay, you should be able to see the screen in 2 seconds.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for spending your evening with me today. As David has said, my name is James Dean, and today we're going to cover writing effective use cases and scenarios. So you might have heard of use cases, you might have heard scenarios, but this is to give you a flavor of kind of how you can use cases and scenarios throughout your career as a business analyst or as a business analyst professional, because we don't really depend on the role or the title. Anyone can use this, but it's to give you a flavor of the difference between use cases and scenarios, but also how you can use them in a practical way. Because when I started my career as a business analyst, it was very much thrown in the deep end and kind of learn for yourself. There was no really kind of training or kind of practical sessions or workshops, and you kind of had to learn as you go. So this is based off my experience and kind of what I've been using to write effective use cases and scenarios. And some of it is from training providers like the likes of amazing people such as Amal Bariali and Laura Brandenburg, where they have their own techniques of how to define use cases and scenarios. But I've taken that and I've adapted it to my approach. So this is my kind of take on how to write effective use cases and scenarios. And this is actually a use case diagram that I had created for a particular project that I had worked on before. Now I've changed this slightly because confidentiality and sensitive client information, but this is an idea of kind of what we're going to go through today. So David has already kind of covered most of these points, but I've been the president of the IIBA Ireland chapter for 5 years this year. So I'm always trying to help and support business analysis professionals in their career journey, whether you're an aspiring business analysis professional, whether you're junior, whether you want to transition into that role or that kind of space with business analysis, because business analysis, let's be honest, it is becoming more and more kind of grown arms and legs where you can go off into different avenues or different paths, which I think is fantastic. But it's key that you have the right kind of skills and techniques and that you have an understanding of not only the theory side, but also the practical side. So I do a lot of work with a great team, a great board members team to be able to strategize to bring practicality not only to Ireland, but also to just to the world, to give them more practical world experiences and how to apply your theory from the likes of like the Baboc guides, so the Business Analysis Body of Knowledge guides, or the BCS, and how you can actually apply that to real world scenarios. So all of this presentation or activities that we will do today are based off like if you're in a real world scenario and how you would go about defining the different types of things that you need to be able to collectively, effectively write a use case and scenario and different kind of tips and tricks of how you can kind of get there. I've been a BA for 8 years. I've worked across multiple industries and each industry has taught me something new, which I think is great because as a BA, you need to be constantly learning. If you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not, I don't like saying failing, but if you're not, we'll say failing, you're not succeeding or you're not growing because the only way you're going to learn is by trying something and maybe it doesn't go so well, but you're actually going to get there eventually. So you're always trying to have that mindset of like continuous improvement, and that's what I've taken from like my kind of 8 years experience as a BA. Now, a fun fact: I didn't actually start as a business analyst. I graduated from college with a Bachelor of Science honors degree in IT management. I had an understanding of kind of like systems, databases, networking, and kind of how they all connected. And I actually used some sort of like use case modeling within college. However, at the time, I didn't know that that was going to be like applied or aligned back to my job as a business analyst. It's only when I started kind of working as a BA, then I was like, oh, hey, this is what you can use it for. And then it kind of like it started to click a little bit better. Because from college, like it gave me all the theory and all the knowledge, but it didn't have the practical side. So I was missing that. So I always try to bring that practicality to anything that I can do to help people, to support people in their career journeys. Even if you're a seasoned or an experienced business analyst, I think it's really important that you're constantly trying to not fall into the trap of like doing things just because it's like some article says, oh, we should do it this way. Like do it so that it makes sense for the people that you're working with within your team, like your stakeholders or your project team or your developers or whoever you're trying to define in this context use cases and scenarios for. But from college, I actually wanted to be a database administrator. So I had a real passion for databases and SQL, so structured query language. I'm writing the SQL to be able to query database, to be able to create tables and so on and so forth. But then when I looked into the kind of job, I suppose, market or aspiration, there wasn't really a lot of opportunities there. So I eventually kind of just fell into a system analyst and developer role. So that's the first company that I started with here, which is ERS, which I get my pointer. So this one here, ERS, and they specialize in developing registry software solutions for different types of registries around the world. And one of my main projects at the start was in Irish registry, where they were modernizing their systems, both front end and back ends. And that this didn't include use cases. It actually didn't include use cases at all. It was more about understanding what the systems were, how the people use those systems, what the different things that they do. So the processes that we're calling like business processes, and then how it all kind of connected together. At this time, I didn't even think, oh, use cases could be slotted into there, or that's what a use case is. It still really wasn't really apparent what it means or how I could use it within my current project. It was only when I transitioned to life sciences in Eurofins that I came across use cases and how to actually an approach to, I'm not saying how to effectively write them, but an approach of how to use them within a project kind of setting. Now, there was a specific template that we had to use, and it was very much, okay, if you have this thing that the user needs to do, this is the way you write it. That was great in giving me the theory and the knowledge and kind of the different aspects or things that you need to include within a use case, but it didn't give me, again, the practical side. So I still kind of struggled to be able to apply a use case when, for example, when I went to the energy industry, because that was a whole kettle of fish. Like that, it's very complex within the energy industry, but they've never had a official business analyst before. So I was the first one coming in, and I was trying to give them an approach to how to define requirements, how to elicit requirements. Don't just think of like solution mode, think of the user, think
Yeah.
of the customer, things like that. So you're always I was trying to shift their mindset. And this is where kind of use cases came in then, because I started looking at use cases in a different light and reading kind of articles and doing my own kind of research and then saying, oh, that's how I can actually apply it within this particular scenario or within this project. Now, it's not a case that you need to use them all the time, but when you do use them, they are really, really effective. So I'm probably going to say that multiple times throughout the session, but I find that they're one of the best tools or techniques that a business analyst professional can actually use within their day-to-day life because it gives them so much value. A little bit of a fun fact, I am a twin. So I have a twin sister who I dance with. So David did mention that I do dancing. I've been dancing since I was 6 years old. Started off in kind of showbiz, stage school dancing. And then I got to about 13 years old and I wanted something new. So I went into hip hop when I was about 13. And I've been in hip hop kind of suppose since I'm 13, but I've been kind of in and out now of dancing because of my full-time job opportunities and the IIBA stuff that have been kind of slightly taken over. But it's been a journey. But this year I'm committed to, or me and my sister are committed to getting back into dancing, and we record a video kind of nearly every week. And our goal is at the end of the year to have at least one video released each month, and we can then start choreographing our own dances. So that's just a little fun fact about me. So today, what will we cover? So I've already talked about use cases. I haven't mentioned what they are yet because I don't want to drill too much into it yet, but I will be giving an approach to defining use cases, how you define them in different types of scenarios, because it's not always so, let's say, black and white or clear cut as a BA that you just get like a document and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can create the use cases. I've been in scenarios before where it's literally like, James, here's a project, here's a one sentence thing, figure it out. And you need to use your analysis skills to be able to say, okay, yeah, I need to take that and see where does the users fit in? How do they need to use this particular system or solution? And then how will they interact with it? And all of these different things tie into a use case. So I'm hoping that you get some benefits and key takeaways based off the approach that I'm going to show and the breaking down of the details in terms of the scenarios. Just a quick, I suppose, roundtable if you want to put into the chat. Let's hear your opinion. What are use cases to you? What do they mean? If I say the word use cases, what do you think of? I probably need to stop sharing to show the chat. So let me see. Has anyone wrote into the chat? It's okay if you don't know what a use case is.
If you don't want to write it, you can unmute your mic and
Yeah, you
contribute.
can unmute
You can
yourself.
speak. Just let me know so I can call you. Anyone? All right, Tamara. Tamara, your hand is up. Okay. AY Adedayo.
Yeah, Khadija. So use case
Hi,
shows the
Khadija.
interaction. Use case shows the interaction between the actor and the system.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that's 100%. That's exactly what a use case is. I've heard of people say use cases are scenarios, and I think we need to be careful there because there is a difference between a use case and a use case scenario. And we will get into that in the session. But if you talk to like senior people, especially in product, they automatically go, oh, use case, and it's a scenario. Like a particular, not even a user scenario, but it might be a scenario of a specific context or a particular topic. And that's where it gets very, you could jump straight into solution mode. So yeah, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. Okay, let me go back to the presentation.
I've got some comment here though. Perhaps we will take that later.
Oh, they're coming through. I see them now.
Yeah.
How a user interacts with the system, shows how user interacts. Yeah, practical application of a business. Use case explains how users interact with a product or system. Yeah. Feedback from client about system change, what a user wants to achieve using a website or platform. Structured description of user interacts with a system. Yeah. So I'm going to give my version of a use case. I'm going to share my presentation again. Let's come back to the starts. Okay. So when I think of a use case, I always try to think of a user because it's either a user or a system interacting with a system or a solution. So when you think of a use case, like I said at the start, a use case is made up of different things, but the actual use case, like the actual not physical, virtual use case is a particular thing that a user or a system is trying to achieve as a goal. So as an example, we're looking at the likes of create accounts, view account details, withdraw money from ATM, update account details. You're looking at kind of actions that a user needs to be able to do within a particular system or a solution. And that system or solution could be a product, a new product that you're designing. It could be an existing application. It could be anything. It just depends on the context. But you're looking at it from first focus on a user plus a goal. So it's all about a goal that is trying to be achieved. And the goal could be from the perspective of a user, or it could be from the perspective of a system. And this is the way that you distinguish between a use case and then a scenario, because the scenario part is the details of that use case. And that's where it gets very, I've seen it used before where people start to jump straight into the details of a use case, but it's very hard if you have, like, say, 5 different use cases and you're trying to get the detail of each of them, you're just going to go straight into solution mode and you're going to lose the kind of the premise or the focus of what a use case is. So it's a specific goal or thing that a user or system is trying to achieve. That's the easy way to look at it. They're also referred to as business use cases. And these were actually created by Ira Jacobson back in around 1960s, where he was working for a telecommunications company called Ericsson, and he was using it from a system point of view. And as the years or time periods went on, then it changed into, hey, it's more about the user rather than the system. Because if you start focusing on the system and what the system needs to do or what the system needs to achieve, just the system, you're going to lose your complete focus and you're not going to be able to align your requirements for what the user needs to the overall business needs. And that's where you're going to lose your kind of focus. You're going to jump into solution mode and you're not going to focus on the user customer perspective. So you need to have that mindset that a use case is first from a goal. So start off with a goal, a single goal of whatever. These could be a list of goals, right? You mightn't have the actors, as someone said. You might have the actors, which would be the users who interact with the system. You might have them defined yet. That's okay. But start off with like a goal. Because if you don't have a goal that a user or system is trying to achieve, then you don't have a good starting point, basically. I like to think of it as who and what. So who is the actor, and the actor can be a type of user. So if you think of like a customer, there could be different types of customers. You could, like in a banking system, you could have like a business customer and you could have like a normal customer. Each one of those users that need to use the banking system would have different goals that they need to achieve. So if you think of what a business customer might need to do over a normal customer, you need to be able to differentiate between different types of needs, because each user needs to use a system or a solution for a particular thing. They're trying to achieve something, right? Like some people, if you're an administrator, you might want to do more kind of like creating reports or managing accounts or managing access. But if you're like a premium customer, you might have specific needs that only you have access to and no other user type does. So if you think of when a use case comes up, think of the who needs to use it and then the what. And the what is the goal. So the what is this user or actor, if we want to call it actor, what is this user or actor trying to achieve within this solution or this system? And again, the system or solution can be a product, it can be an existing application, whatever it is that they're actually interacting with. It's how the user interacts with that particular system or solution. Let's look at an example. So use cases, you might see like some articles where it's a description of how a user interacts with a system or solution to achieve a goal. Now, when people see the word describe, they think it's a load of details, right? They think it's a load of details that are made up for one particular goal. But the use case doesn't start like that. The use case, like we said, starts with a goal and who needs to achieve that goal. And when you're trying to model different types of use cases and the different types of users, a great way to do that is a use case diagram. Now, we're not going to be covering specifically in this session what a use case diagram is and how you create it, because that could be a whole session in itself. But this is just an example to show you where a use case would fit in to a particular diagram. So if we look here, this is a report system, and we have two different types of users or actors. So we have a finance manager and we have an accountant. Within the boundaries of the system, so this is the system boundary box here. Within this system, these little ovals are the actual use cases. So these are the goals that a user is trying to achieve. So the finance manager, they need to be able to generate admin reports. They need to be able to view customer financial data, and they need to be able to create staff timesheets. Where an accountant just needs to be able to calculate customer financials and view customer financial data. So you can see that there's two different goals that the accountant is trying to achieve here, but there's three different goals that the finance manager is trying to achieve. And the important thing is here, when you do get into using use cases and you have defined the goal or created the goal based off the type of user, you can create a very basic diagram like this to basically model your scope. So if you have, let's say you're developing a new product and you don't really know where to start. Well, the first thing would be like, who are the users that are going to use that product? Who are the users that are going to use that project? Who are the type of users? And what are they trying to achieve? And if you can get the what are they trying to achieve, then you will have a list of goals based off the different types of users or actors. And then you can simply model how they need to interact based off the goal that they're trying to achieve. And this will then bring up other kind of questions. Like if you're an experienced business analyst, you might be looking into, okay, is there like restriction access or access privileges that we need to apply to this particular use case? Or what are the business rules? Like what are the different pieces of logic that we need to apply in order for this finance manager to generate admin reports? Or how do we restrict an accountant from not accessing admin reports? It brings up a whole load of questions, and you can use this like as an elicitation technique within a requirement session, and you can present it. But the main thing to take away from this slide is a use case can be modeled within a use case diagram, and there normally is more than one based off a one or more user needs. So these are what the user needs to be able to do within this reporting system, for example. Now, to define use cases, I've seen two different scenarios. So you have this concept of business requirements, which aligns back to the business analysis body of knowledge guide, the Dobac guide. And if it's very clerical that you kind of know the goals based off the business needs, the expectations, and you have the different stakeholders that need to be involved within the project, you can probably break down those requirements and figure out what is the use case. So if you're looking at like a stakeholder needs to be able to, let's say, manage financial data. Manage financial data, if you're looking at that, manage can mean different things, right? So it can mean multiple different things. Is it like creating some? Is it viewing something? Is it updating some? What is that goal that that particular stakeholder needs to be able to achieve? And when you figure out that goal, you can figure out if that user, or sorry, if that stakeholder needs to interact with the solution or system when it's actually implemented. Because a lot of the time, our stakeholder groups that we elicit or we analyze or map out actually turn into the end users who would use the product or the system or the solution. So if you're looking at a particular goal of a stakeholder, you can split it down into its specific use cases or goals that that overall group needs to achieve. And the way that you would, I suppose, define a use case is based off a verb plus noun. So if you're looking at a verb as like an action, so you're looking at the likes of like I said, create, view, update, reconcile. Like it's an action word that that user is trying to use plus something else as like an object or like a person, a place, a thing, so a noun, and that as a combination will give you your use case. Don't write a use case as like the system needs to update account details, because that's the thing that the system needs to handle based off that particular use case, but it's not what the user needs to do as a goal. If the user needs to update account details, well then it should be verb update plus noun account details. So you're making it very, very specific. And this makes it easier for to use in your like requirement sessions and to be able to basically scope out what you're trying to do based off different goals of different users. And I found this approach is great when you do have the requirements. You can use the likes of a workshop, you can use interviews, you can even use process modeling. So if there is a, let's say, a future state process modeling, or like this is the way we want this particular process to work in the future, that's what I mean by future state or to be, then you can actually derive the specific use cases from that model if it is modeled in a way that aligns with the goals of what each of those teams are trying to do or what they need to be able to do. If they haven't been defined, so let's say the business requirements, I've been in situations where, like I said, a one-liner is thrown to me and it's like, James, figure it out. There's no requirements, right? It could be from a technical perspective. It could be a one word thing. It could be a phrase that I was given. It could be a concept or a term. But I need to use my analysis skills to say, okay, where do I start? But then how do I figure out like the use cases? Because if you're just starting with the business requirements, you're starting at the top level, right? You're talking about the business need, you're talking about the why, you're talking
Mhm.
about the goals, you're talking about objectives, you're talking about success metrics. But as you drill down, you have your stakeholder requirements, and then you have your solution requirements, which are your functional requirements, which align with a particular use case. So to get to that functional level, it can be a bit tricky, but there is ways that you can do it by using different techniques. It does take a lot of kind of back and forth, and it's not so straightforward where you have a particular, say, business requirements document or a scope statement where you can say, oh, yeah, cool, I can take them and I can start breaking it down. And then I can start modeling my different use cases because I know what the goals of each stakeholder are. If you don't have that, you need to basically take a step back and you need to look at the bigger picture and start using different analysis techniques to get to something like this stage. And you can use the likes of like discovery workshops, you can use product vision boards, you can use again interviews, and you can use process modeling. But I've found the key thing is that you're actively communicating and collaborating with your stakeholders. So if you have a new project and you're trying to define, okay, how does the user need to use this new solution or this system? You need to start somewhere, right? So you need to start from understanding. You're not just going to jump into, oh, how do they need to use it? Because you don't understand the context. You don't understand the why behind it. And you need to understand the why before you can even start defining the functional parts. Because if you start with just the functional part, you could miss out a key thing that the user needs to be able to do or that a stakeholder group needs to be able to achieve. And if you're not defining that, then you're going to miss out that particular scope and you could deliver something that the user mightn't be able to use or it mightn't give them what they actually need. So you want to be careful with your like separating your wants from your needs because a lot of the time businesses are trying to deliver quickly to market. They're trying to deliver new services, new piece of functionality, but they could be rushing. And if they're rushing too much, you're in solution mode and you're missing the kind of the key thing, which is the why. So you can't get to the what before you define the why. If you have the why, then you can get to the what. But if you don't, you need to start at the why, which is the business requirement stage, based off the Babok guide. Okay, So a quick activity. So based off a flight booking system, I want you to, in the chat, just write out some use cases. Just brainstorm some use cases. And we want to remember to think of both the actors, who are the users of this flight booking system, and what are their goals. So what are the different types of actors or users, and what are their specific goals? So I'm going to give about 2 to 3 minutes just for you guys to figure out that. And if you want to write your answers into the chat, or alternatively, if you want to come off mute, please feel free. Okay, so we have one customer, find flight, pay for flight. We have search for flights, book the flight, select seats, check baggage limits. Great. As a user, get the best, cheapest flight. Ticket agent, create a refund. Very good. Customer, confirm flight details. Admin, check booked flights. Customer, search for cheap flight, check the cost and book a flight. Okay. Yeah, I think you guys are getting it. So the goal and the user, I can see a lot of these here. I would be careful when we mention the word user, just to define what that actually means, because there can be different types of users. So if you're talking about Shilpa, I think it was, user book tickets with points rewards, just define who that user is. And you can use the likes of like a persona in a workshop to be able to define the different types of users. If you don't know the type of users, then you need to be able to um, workshop them out with different types of stakeholders so that you can make sure that it's very specific. Because if you put in, say, if you take that use case and then we eventually go to a user story, you have as a user, I want to do something. The user part mightn't be clear to the development team, and they need the context of the specific like user role or type of user to be able to, I suppose, give them a solution that will fulfill their needs. So just keep that in mind. Customer, change flight day, search flight, book flight, confirm flight. Cool. Airline sales manager needs sales reports. Authorize refund. Yeah, I think these are great. Great job. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to flick back to the presentation. Okay, so this is my high-level approach or process for defining use cases. And again, this is just a starting point. If you've seen, we haven't even touched on the details of a use case yet. We're just trying to define what is the goal that this particular type of user needs to achieve, or what are the goals that these type of users need to achieve? Because you need to start at the high level first and then break it down into its detail. So I always start by gathering some sort of information. So this could be known as requirements gathering. However, I like to see requirements gathering as you're gathering the information to help you define what you need to do to schedule your elicitation sessions to define the requirements. So it's to me, it's a personal thing. Requirements gathering, because it can make it look like requirements are there to literally be picked up off the table, like apples on the table, apples out of a tree, documents just sitting there waiting to be grabbed. And if that was the case, then I suppose the business analysis role would be redundant because anyone could do that, right? I'll give a quick example. In one of my previous work jobs, I was given a task when I started in the company, and I was told that the requirements had already been gathered and it's on a recording that you just need to watch. So if you watch that recording, you will know what the requirements are. Now, if you're an experienced BA, you would be like, what is going on? This is not right. That's exactly what my mind was doing. Alarm bells were going off, red flags everywhere, and I was like, this is not good, because it just makes it look like, oh, we've had this one session with a stakeholder group and we think that we know what the requirements are. Now, I kind of knew deep down that that wasn't the case. And only when I started, like, I watched the recording, okay? I watched it. It was about 2 hours long. And I came away with more questions than answers. And that's a true story. And I had to then basically start the whole BA approach process again. So start from the start. Even the business need wasn't clear. It wasn't clear what we were trying to do, what was the problem, what was the opportunity, who was impacted, what were we trying to do, what processes are involved. Nothing. None of that had been mapped out or scoped. So it left me kind of in, I suppose, a little bit of a, I was in a gap. I was like, this doesn't make sense. So I had to start again. So this is where elicitation is really important as a business analysis professional. It's not that you start off with something and you know straight away that, oh, these are the requirements. Let's take the use case, for example. If you're trying to scope out the user goals and the different types of users, you're not going to get it in one big session, right? Even if, I think even if you have a 3-hour workshop, it's not necessarily that you're going to get to the end of that workshop and be like, yeah, okay, we know all the different types of users that need to interact with this system or solution, and we know what their goals are. It's never so straightforward like that. A lot of people, especially stakeholders, when they're talking to you, they don't say, oh, this user needs to be able to do this thing in the system. It's, unfortunately, it's never that clear. So we need to be able to use our analysis skills to be able to help them get to that stage. And this is where this is the type of process that I use to help me do that. So based off what I have gathered as information to help me within a workshop, I would then capture the elicitation results, and I wouldn't take them for verbatim. I wouldn't say, okay, yeah, this is exactly what these users need to do. I would analyze it, and that's what we should be doing. We should be analyzing to see, are there gaps? Are there things that don't make sense? Is it very solution specific? Because we shouldn't even be at the solution option alternative analysis stage yet. We should be just looking at what is the goal of these type of users, because we need to come up with like some scope. So based off the goals that different stakeholders would have in the company, you could take each one of those and you could split it down into its individual use cases. And I'll show an example of that in a few minutes. But you could have one stakeholder group. That stakeholder group is A, and stakeholder group A has a, let's say, one high level goal. And you know that high level goal, once it talks about, like, if you know the business need is to develop a new product, to solve a new problem, or to address an existing issue, you know that those stakeholder goals are going to feed into your solution requirements, which are your functional requirements, which are the use cases in this particular context. So you know if a user, or sorry, not a user, a stakeholder has to manage customer account information, you can take that as a starting point within your elicitation session, and you can do a workshop on that and map it to specific use cases, so the goals and the users that would align with that particular high level goal, And then you can do that for each of your different stakeholder goals. And eventually you come to a big picture and you could have a use case diagram then with all your different use cases, all your different users or types of users, and then how they interact with those use cases in the system. So it gives you the idea of how the bigger picture is going to look. But this isn't a linear process, right? It's back and forth. So you're analyzing, you're making sure, is it clear? If it's not clear, you're going to go back again. If it is clear, you mightn't just start like documenting straight away. You might maybe create a visual, or you might put it into a use case diagram to get other people's feedback. You also need to check technical feasibility. So it's not just, oh, we can develop all these things that the user needs to be able to do. We need to see, are they feasible? Because if the user asks for something and we write our user story and then we define all the details, we got our acceptance criteria, and then we go to implementation and we haven't discussed technical feasibility prior with the development team or technical team, and then we figure out, hey, actually we can't do that because we don't store that piece of data, we can't link out to that system, or we don't have the ability to generate a report, or we just don't have that person on this team to actually give us that support, then you're just back to square one. So always when you get your high level use cases in terms of the goals and the types of users, always verify and validate. So you're gathering, you're analyzing, you're verifying, you're validating, and you're confirming. And when you get to the, let's say, the definition stage, so when you have like a clear kind of idea of these are the use cases that we need that are in scope for the system or solution that we're building or improving, then that's where we start to break them down. And we're breaking them down into their particular scenarios, which I will cover in a few minutes. And that's where we get to the details. That's where it's really, really key to make sure that those scenarios make sense based off the goal that a user is trying to achieve. And when you break them down, again, you're verifying, you're validating. And this is the whole process that I've been using today. It's not perfect. I don't think there's a such thing as perfect. The same with perfect requirements, they don't exist. Changes could happen, right? So always keep that in mind, because especially in the energy industry, if we have particular requirements that we've defined for a particular energy market, at any time, regulation could change. And then all of our scope is up in the air and we need to reprioritize, we need to rescope based off the use cases that we've defined or the requirements that we've defined. And it's a whole kind of change impact analysis thing going on. So it's not so straight cut that it's always like a linear process. Understand that it's a lot of back and forth and actively communicating and collaborating with different people in the business or different stakeholders to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that you're defining the right scope at the right time. This was an example product discovery whiteboard that I used in a project recently. And this was a great example just to be able to understand, to get to the use case stage. If I zoom in, now I've redacted a lot of the confidential information because I can't share that. But by understanding like the outcomes of the products, the user groups, their needs or their goals, and the key features, these four things allowed me to take away information to then see, okay, where can that fit into a goal that the user is trying to achieve? And who are those users? Like, who are my different types of users? So if this was a new energy product that we were developing, we found out that we have needs to be able to view event performance, to be able to view revenue, estimate revenue or earned revenue, and to be able to view different types of reports. So view energy reports. Those are the needs or the goals that we're talking about here. And the different types of users were based off the groups that we had. So these were the groups that were in scope based off the overall vision of the product that we were developing. And the groups in this context were like energy market analysts. they were site managers, they were customer, what would they call it? Customer engineer managers. Those three different groups. So I automatically could take that and say, right, these are our different types of users that need to interact with this product that we're developing. And based off their needs or their goals, these are the different things that they need to do. They need to be able to achieve this, and they need to be able to achieve this. And that gave me a starting point. It's not the full end solution, it's not the full scope, but it gave me a starting point to say, hey, okay, I have three goals here. I have three different types of users. Now let me drill further into what those goals actually entail. Because if you event performance, like that could mean multiple things, right? I know because based off my experience working in the energy industry, which is 2 years now, that event means different types of events. So to clarify the scope, I had to then drill further into that to say, okay, when we talk about view and event performance, what type of events are we talking about? Oh, there's dispatch events, there's demand peak, there's price peak. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I can already see the scope kind of growing arms and legs. But what do we need as a minimum functionality for these particular users? Like where can our focus be? So that was a whole, like weekly refinement sessions with different stakeholders, different senior people in the business. But it gave me, this whole whiteboard gave me the key information that I needed to be able to take away to then analyze, break it down, and then discuss in terms of, okay, clarification of scope or the definition of scope, because this wasn't a one and done session. This went on for like at least three or four. And there was a lot of back and forth. Oh, we think we need this goal. Oh, actually, no, we're going to include this. Oh, no, we need this user. Oh, what about this user group? So it was a very like a brainstorming ideation, and it was very eye-opening because this was an example where the business requirements weren't really defined, and we had to use these different techniques to be able to basically break it down into the specific use cases that I needed in order to define the scope for the functional requirements. What happened there? Okay. Okay. Another thing that I use or technique is it's the Dobac guide. So the Dobac guide has been a Bible for business analysis professionals. And the key thing to remember is it's a guide. It's not a how-to guide. It is a guide for how to do business analysis. And what that means is you need to take the theory and the content and the different techniques, and you need to see how you can adapt to different scenarios and apply that content and those techniques and that information. It's not like I said at the start, it's not a straight cut. This is a linear process of what you do in every project, and this is what you do in every scenario. You need to always take a step back as a business analyst professional and be like, hey, how can I approach this? So when you're creating your BA approach, you're always looking at how can I approach this based off these type of things. And these are the key things that I find are really useful when I'm defining use cases. So by looking at the likes of the business needs, you're looking at the business requirements, you're looking at the stakeholder requirements, and you're looking at the solution requirements, which are made up of functional and non-functional. So these are only what I think of in my approach or include within my approach or my process when I'm working through, oh, how do I actually define a use case, or how do I go about figuring out this new thing that I've been given. And by using these, I find it so key, and it's been so valuable because it gives an easy visualization of, okay, if I know what the problem or opportunity is that has been identified, like what is the actual overall business need and what's the why, like what is the business trying to achieve and why is it important and what goals are they trying to achieve? And these could be high level goals. You can drill down then into the who. So the stakeholders, I like to think in this context of use cases as the users. So if you think of different stakeholders, you might have some that will interact with a system or solution. You might have some that won't. In the context of use cases, when you're mapping out your stakeholder goals, you're looking at which ones are actually going to use the system or solution. And they're the ones that you want to focus on for this context or part of the project. Not saying you forget about the other stakeholders, but they're not in scope for what you're trying to do for use cases specifically. And when you understand those users who need to use that system or solution, then you're down to the what. And the what, if you remember from the start, is the goal. So based off who needs to use or interact with that system or solution, what do they need to use it for? Like, what do they need? Not what do they want, what do they need? Because when you get further into your career and you have all these different projects that you're trying to prioritize and you're trying to understand all these different requirements, you need to separate wants from needs, because someone might want something because, oh, it's a new piece of technology, or it's a nice to have, or they think it's going to help them improve the way that they work today. But you need to analyze that. You need to make sure that that want is actually a need, because we should be focusing on the needs first, and then anything else comes like an add-on. I've had experiences where I've defined the scope for like use cases, and these are the different types of users. They need to use the system for this. And then when you show the users who are going to use the system, they're like, oh, what about this? Or, oh, why we need to be able to do this, or we need, and I'm like, they say need, but I see it as want, because I know by looking at the need or their need, it doesn't align back to the business need. Like, it doesn't solve the problem that they're having, or it doesn't address an opportunity based off our vision that we've created. So our problem statement or our vision statement, if it doesn't align back to that, then it needs to be negotiated as to why, because you don't want to just add new features or new things that you think the user needs when it's actually a want. So you need to be very careful when you come to like the solution part, because it's very, very important that needs are addressed before wants. Let's look at an example. So if we had a business need, let's say it's a problem, and let's just say it's a hotel booking or a hotel where the traditional booking system is slow, it's inefficient, and it requires guests to call or visit in person. So the why, if we drill down to the business requirements based off the Dobac guide, let's say the objective is to increase revenue by enabling 24/7 room booking accessibility. Let's just say that's one of our objectives. And to achieve this, or to measure against this, our goal is to increase direct hotel bookings by 20% in the first year. So we know when we have implemented a solution for this, we have an overall objective that we're trying to achieve. We also have a success metric. So we know we can measure against this. We can see, have we actually reached this particular goal in the context of increasing direct hotel bookings by 20% in the first year. So we need to include that like within our scope, but it's not in the context of a use case. If we take this problem statement and this objectives, and we do our requirement elicitation sessions or our workshops or our discovery sessions, and drill down to the stakeholder level, the who. So we're focusing on users. So users who need to use this hotel booking, or who need to actually be able to book something in a hotel. We're looking at two different types of users: guests and staff. So let's say they're our focus points. And when we look at the what, or what they need to be able to use it for, these are our use cases. And these are the functional requirements. So your use cases could be something like, hey, as a guest, I want to be able to search for a room. Or as a guest, I want to be able to reserve a room. Or as a staff member, I want to be able to manage reservations. And by looking at the last one there, the manage word, that gives my mind's alarm bells, because I'm like, manage could mean multiple things. So is it to create reservations? Is it to actually report on reservations? Is it to export? What is it? Like, so you need to drill further into that to be able to get the context and the actual what the need is, because this could turn into like multiple different use cases, and then you could have like six. So instead of just three, you could have six. But this is just an example of kind of how you can use it based off the business need at the top level, drilling down to the business requirements, then the stakeholder requirements in the context of a user, and then the solution requirements in the context of a user need or a use case. And you could go ahead then and create your nice little use case diagram where you have your hotel booking system as your system boundary. You have your different types of users or actors, which are your guests and your staff. And then you need to understand which needs of those users relate to the type of user. So is it a guest that needs to search for a room and reserve a room? Is it a staff that needs to be able to reserve a room? What does that work? But you figure that out in a workshop, right? This is just an example of how you can see the drill down between a business need and the solution requirements. If we're looking at this in an example, so a use case diagram, so I mentioned this at the start, and it's just to give a bit more context in terms of the different elements within a use case diagram. Again, we're not going to cover this in today's session, but if you do want to find out more information, we can have a separate session to go through specific use case diagrams and how we create them, and then what are all the different elements. But at a high level, we have this black box that surrounds the system or solution, and this is called your system boundary box. And what this means is this is the boundaries that the system must abide by. So anything inside this system is basically what the user needs to interact with, or what an actor needs to be able to interact with. And when we're talking about what they need to interact with, we're talking about the use cases. So these are the blue ovals here and there could be multiple, like several different use cases. And in a scope of a large project, you could have multiple different systems that multiple different types of users or actors need to interact with. So you could have a separate use case diagram for each of those systems. But the key thing is that you model this so that you get everyone on the same page. So if you've had a requirement session and you've done like a lot of, let's say, discovery of the different types of users and how they need to interact in terms of their goals, and you've captured them on sticky notes, it's very hard to visualize like, okay, how many users is that? How many use cases do we have? So this visual is a great way to be able to easily represent that and make sure that every stakeholder that was in that session actually agrees to these particular use cases. Because there could be a thing where they're like, hey, actually, that's not right. We can't allow that. Or no, we don't need that. Or if you're trying to scope this out, this could be V1. And then you could maybe split this where you have two of these, which would be V2, so that if you're in an agile environment, you're using like a minimal viable product to split out your scope or chunk it up so that it's easier then to develop. It just depends on the context of your project or the way that your company works, but this is just an example. The blue stickmen here, so the accountant and the finance manager, these are known as actors. I also like to think of them as users because they are how a user interacts with a system or solution, but the common or the real term is actor. So just keep that in mind. And then the black lines, which are connecting the actor to a use case, are known as association lines. So this is how an actor is associated to a particular use case. So it can be one or more. Okay, I think I've talked enough about use cases, but let's try an activity. So I want this to be interactive as much as possible. And again, the practicality side is where you will kind of learn best. So the goal of this activity is to be able to define use cases for a specific use case diagram. Now, I've provided the use case diagram, so you don't need to worry about that aspect. There is a Miro board that we're going to use, and this is the activity. So we will be splitting you guys into your own individual breakout rooms. When you have your specific breakout room number, please just use that one there because there is a lot of different room numbers on the board. So if you're room 12, please navigate to room 12 and use that one. Otherwise, you will be trying to use one that another group is trying to use. Within this, there is two specific tasks, and I've given a case study. So the case study is based off a healthcare appointment scheduling system, and it's in the context of a large hospital chain known as ABC Health, wanting to modernize their appointment scheduling system because they're seeing lack of improvement in terms of efficiency, and they want to enhance the patient experience. So there is a little bit of a problem statement where currently patients are booking appointments manually via phone calls, but there's the likes of like long wait times, scheduling conflicts, and high no-show rates. So to solve this, they want to introduce an AI-powered appointment scheduling system that will do all of these different things, like dynamically manage doctor availability, predict patient wait times, optimize scheduling using historical data, integrate with telemedicine, send reminders to reduce missed appointments. And the first task that you need to do is identify the core use cases that align with the business goals. And we're splitting this between the users or the actors and the needs and the goals. So based off this particular case study, you need to analyze it and break it into its specific users who need to use this AI-powered appointment scheduling system and the particular needs or goals that each of those users need to achieve. Now, you can add more sticky notes if you like. You just need to click on it and copy. So if you right click or if you control C and control V as an easy, or you can right click and copy and then right click and paste. When you have these mapped out, the next thing is to map your use cases. So this will be the needs or the goals to these oval boxes here. So I've created the use case diagram here. You need to put the actual use case goal in here. And you need to figure out, based off the type of user, which of the goals align with each actor. So you have different actors here. There could be more, but we're going to give it a go. And if you need any help at any time, please let me know. So I'm going to put the link into the chat.
Okay. Thank you very much, James. That's quite robust, and that's a big one there. So I dropped something here. I feel most people might come back to the main call, saying what's the case study. So I feel you should get your case study readily available before you go into your breakout rooms, so that will make it easier for you. And James, how many minutes are we assigning to them?
Yeah, I think it will give it 10 minutes. That should be enough. But if we do need to add on some more time, then we can look at
Okay.
that.
Okay. So 10 minutes. Um, all right. So we have 5 breakout rooms now, and you're gonna find yourself in one of the breakout rooms. Please use the breakout room here to get your use the breakout room to get your mirror, because we have loads of breakout rooms there, so that we are all on the same page. Okay, so we have 5 rooms. Just use 5 rooms on the mirror. All right. All right. Are we all good? Can I get reaction? If we are good, then let's get our hands dirty.
Do you want me to join one of the breakout rooms, David?
Yes, please. You can join. Let me see.
I think it's a
Room
invite me to
three.
breakout 3.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
you can join room 3, please.
cool.
All right, so if you are currently watching our live stream, you might not see what's going on, but we're gonna try our best to join each of the rooms so you see what is being done. Although I'm gonna share my screen from here so you can have a look. If you're not participating, for you to be part of this, you need to be on this call with us. Okay. Okay, so I might just share. Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Great.
Are we all back from our breakout rooms?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I will flick back to the presentation. How did everyone find that exercise?
It was quite interactive and
Did,
engaging.
Was interactive, but it was too short and timing was short.
you would have preferred a lot longer?
The time is very short, so
Yes, please.
couldn't couldn't finish it.
Because we're
Yeah, I'll
part
definitely take that as a no to take away. Because yeah, I suppose when I'm defining the use cases, I can do it a little bit quicker. But that's a great point to make. So thanks so much for that. Did you find it was easy to identify the users and then their goals by having that kind of split rather than just jumping into a use case?
I think for my room we stopped at the need, but linking it to the goal, we didn't get to that point. I think it's a
Okay.
bit confusing for me.
Did anyone manage to, I suppose, does anyone want to share what they've created?
Yeah, I would say we take it from room one, room two, room three. Perhaps they should, nominate a leader, the person that shared his screen, so we can get feedback from them. So over to you guys.
Okay, so I'll speak on behalf of room one because
Okay.
I shared my screen and okay. So just a few heads up. At first, we were kind of not all aligned, everybody just doing their stuff, but then we kind of found our rhythm. Yep. And we got to the needs and we identified 5 users by asking, okay, based on the previous system they had, the patient calls, who would pick the call, we'll say that be the administrative clerk. And then, okay, the doctors would also need to have access to the scheduling system, the nurses involved, and the practice manager also be involved. Then we got to defining the needs or the goals for the patient. And we said for the patient, they would have 4 needs. They want to schedule an appointment. They want to confirm that appointment. They also might want to receive appointment reminders. And then the update appointments, we capture these as a broad term to cover modifications like rescheduling, canceling, and any necessary updates that the patient may want to make. Because ideally, maybe a patient booked a schedule or maybe made a mistake or want to change, it falls under this update appointment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is what we had before the time elapsed. So these ones were when we were not yet aligned, people just, but when we got aligned, this was what we were able to achieve. That's
Brilliant.
all
It
from
looks like you achieved a lot. I know you probably needed more time, but this exercise was really to focus on those needs and the different types of users. So what are the goals of each of those type of users? The use case diagram was more than just trying to match them so you can see in a visual, but you look like you've done a great job there in identifying the different types of goals and the different types of users based off those goals. So great job.
thank you to group one.
All right. So the next group, can we have your team leader?
Yeah, sure. I'll speak on behalf of two. So I'll share my screen.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so caveats, time constraints as well as not used to Miro, so kind of struggled with input in the test and whatnot. So, but anyway, so these are the users that we're able to kind of map out. So the patient, nurse, consultant, doctors, pharmacist, and customer service advisor. But actually the customer service advisor will change to admin, but that's not reflected on the sticky note. Then in terms of the goals, the needs and goals, so book appointments, send auto reminders, request prescription, send prescription, view schedule, and consult patients. Then we went on then to mapping out the use cases then within the system boundary. So we identified 6 actors. Again, from what we, the users. So the patient, nurse, pharmacist, doctor, consultant, and then the admin. So in terms of the use cases, and this is where we stopped because of time. So we couldn't necessarily associate, map out the associations, but then just the 3 use cases that we mapped out were book appointments, set auto reminders, and then consult patients. So that's where we wrapped up. Thanks.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think again, you've done a great job. Like you've identified the use cases in terms of the users and the goals. And I see there is a kind of theme where booking an appointment is one of the important things that patients need to be able to do. So I'm glad everyone, well, so far everyone has captured that as an actual goal. Again, the use case diagram is secondary, but the focus was just to make sure when you talk about a use case or think about a use case, you're thinking of the users as the actors and the needs as the goals. So you've done a great job.
Thank you.
All right. The last group, can you present, please? Who is presenting for you guys?
Oh, this was me. This was me sharing the screen with my group.
Ah, right. Okay.
Well, I don't think it makes sense for me to. If someone wants to take over,
That's cheating now, James. That's cheating. Go for it.
they have an
I'll present.
advantage.
Display the screen.
Perhaps you should nominate someone from that group. Can we nominate someone from that group, please?
James, I'll present if you'll share the screen.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
brilliant. Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to share the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you, Tamara.
Okay. So for our users, we were able to identify the patients, the office administrator, the doctors, a specialist if there is a secondary doctor that they need to see, the clinical officer, as well as the pharmacist. For the needs or goals that we anticipated, we believe that they need to be able to schedule their appointments, confirm patient arrivals, view patient appointments or information. Additionally, individuals need to be able to reschedule appointments as well as cancel appointments, which can be done by either the patient or the administrator. And so if you look over at the model, we have the patient being able to schedule their own appointments, being able to reschedule their appointments if something comes up, or having to cancel their appointments if they're not able to pick a new date at that time. The doctor being able to view the patient appointments as well as patient information, and the administrator also being able to view patient appointments as well as editing appointments. And we weren't able to get to the rest of the goals at that time for the model.
Okay, brilliant. That's great.
And I didn't do any of that work. That was the entire team.
Yeah, good job. Good job. All right, James, over to you.
Okay. Let me flick back. Okay, so this is just an example of kind of what you could have came out with. Don't think that this is the perfect solution. This is just what I was thinking. But this is the whole point of each person could have their different perspective or opinion on what are the type of users that need to interact with a system, in this case, the appointment booking system, and what they need to be able to do. So I split patient into two different categories, one for existing patients, because if they're an existing patient, they could book an appointment. But however, if you're a prospective patient, so if you're a new patient that wants to sign up for this particular GP practice, you might have a sign up option. So that might be a need that a prospective patient might actually want to be able to do. So I just differentiate between them. And we have a book appointment for an existing patient. You have the reschedule appointments, you have cancel appointments, and you have receive appointment reminders. So I see a lot of these have already been covered in everyone's activity, which is great because I think they are the core needs of a particular patient. And then if you look at a doctor, very simply, he needs to also be able to reschedule appointments in case he can't actually make that appointment, or if something happens, if he's sick, and he needs to be able to cancel appointments. So if there was something urgent on his side, his or her side, they would need to be able to cancel the appointments. So I split it into two different ones, but this could actually be one use case called update appointments. And within the update, you could do multiple different things when we get to the scenarios. So I am conscious of time, but we are jumping into scenarios now, which is great. So we have our use case, we have our type of user, and we have their goal. Now, when you're looking at a use case, you're looking at different things that are contained within a use case, and these are what are called scenarios, or the different kind of options that you're looking at. So it's basically a way, this is how the user, or a way a user interacts with the system or solution. So now you're going into the specifics of that particular use case goal. And you're looking at the likes of like an overview, the actors involved, the triggers, scenarios, and conditions. When you break that down further, it's actually called a use case description. So when you have your use case as, this is my user, this is my goal, this is where you break it down into its details. So the overview, you have your name, you've already defined your name based off your verb plus noun. You now need to come up with a purpose. So based off that goal, what is that user trying to do? So based off that goal, what is that user trying to do? So if they're trying to create an account, you might put additional context in here. And this is like a sentence, or like a word, a short and concise sentence that aligns with the user goal. So if it's like create accounts, you'd say, why does that user like want to create accounts? They need to be able to do it for some particular reason. We then have these things called trigger, which is the start and end. So how does the use case start? Like, what are the things that need to be in place before we can start the flow of this use case? And then how does it end? Because we need to know the start and end in order to be able to understand how the system behaves. Because when we go into the scenarios, we have a user and system kind of ping pong, or like an interaction back and forth. The user does this, the system does this, the system does this, the user does this. And you need to be able to see, how does it start and end, because the ping pong part will happen in between the start and the end. And when I show an example, that part will be a little bit clearer. You've already defined your actor. So you have your actor, which is your type of user. And then the scenarios, which is I would say one of the most important parts, is split into different types of flows. So I like to look at these as like the happy path, the alternate path, and the exception path. The happy path is, what are the steps that the user goes through in order to achieve this goal without anything going wrong. So like what are the things that they will like mainly do all the time without anything going wrong? The alternate paths are what are the things that a user could do differently to achieve the same goal? And then the exception path is what are the things that could go wrong? And how does the system behave? How does the system respond to those things? So when you're thinking of scenarios, you need to think of these different types of flows because they all would have their own set of requirements or steps that the user and system need to be able to do. And when we look at an example, I'll show exactly what that means. Your conditions have a true before starting and a true after ending. So this is like your precondition, and then your true after ending is your post condition. These are really important because the system needs to be able to validate something being true before a use case can actually begin. Because if, for example, the use case was to be able to create an account or be able to view account details and the user can't actually log in or they haven't logged into the system, then they're not going to be able to they're not going to be able to view their account details because they haven't logged in. So you need to be very specific in terms of what the user can do and how that system will validate that these are the things that must occur before the use case can actually begin. And then the same after ending. After the use case is finished, what are the things that should happen? Should a new record be created in the system? Should the user be able to view a success message on screen? Like, what is the specific thing that you're trying to validate that the system is trying to validate? Let's look at an example. So we have a use case which is in the context of request and leave. We have all of the different things that we need here. So this is where you start taking your use case and you break it down into its details. So because you have request leave, your purpose is to allow a company employee to request different types of leave. So you can already see that it's not just one type of leave, it's different types. So you need to figure out what are the differences between those different types of leave, and then how does it affect this overall use case. And you do that through, again, your workshops, your elicitation sessions with your different stakeholders, where you're drilling into the details. But you know that to achieve this goal of request and leave, you need to get all of these different details. Your starts when is when the actual use case starts. So this is the first thing that the user would do. In this context, our user or actor is our company employee. So the use case starts when they select to apply for leave. It ends when they can view that the type of leave has been successfully requested. So very simple, they need to be able to select to apply for leave, and then we know that the use case ends when they can view that, hey, this type of leave has been successfully requested. We've already identified our actor for our user as a company employee, but the system actor in this context, because it's always a user system interaction, is a HR system. So when I'm labeling actors for system, I don't try to make it very specific for that system, like the name of a banking system, the name of an accounts payable system. Put it very generic, because you could use this system actor somewhere in another use case, especially if they're using the same system. So just be careful there, not to make it very system specific, but to make it very generic. Your conditions or your preconditions are what are the things that need to happen before this employee can select to apply for leave. So they need to obviously have logged into the HR system, and let's say the leave balance is available. If these two things are not available or they can't be validated by the system, then this use case it can't work based off this particular context. So these are the things that need to happen before the use case can actually start. So you're trying to align this part here with the starts when. Your post conditions are what happens after. So these are the conditions or things that the system needs to validate after the use case has ended. So you're looking at your ends when here. but you're looking in the context of two different things, success and failure. So I always see that there's post conditions that involve when is this successful, and then there could be post conditions of when the use case will end when a failure has occurred. So this success scenario here is when the leave request has been successfully requested and an email has been sent to the company employees manager for approval. That's when we know how to validate that this request leave use case has been successful. For failure, let's say the leave request is cancelled or the company employee has insufficient leave balance. So if there's insufficient leave balance, then this request leave, there's no point allowing the company employee to get the system to send an email to their manager if they don't have the required leave balance. So we need to make sure that that doesn't happen. And if they get so far, we need to basically stop them from doing that if their balance hasn't, if their balance isn't, if they're trying to request leave for balance that isn't available because they've no longer any more leave. If you think of like annual leave, you only have so much annual leave a year. So if you go over that limit, then we shouldn't allow them to request leave. That's one condition that the system will need to be able to validate against after the use case has actually finished. The happy path, so these are the steps that the user and system goes through in order to achieve this particular goal. And this is without anything going wrong. So if we look at this particular example, you're again looking from a user system point of view, but when you're talking about what a user needs to be able to do or a system needs to be able to do or how it needs to respond, think of like, again, user actions and system response. So if a user selects to apply for leave, then the system needs to display a list of leave types. If the user then selects an annual leave type, what does the system do? It checks the leave balance. The system then displays an option to input annual leave details. The user inputs annual leave details. The system displays an option to request leave. They then select to request leave, where the system attempts to log the leave request. If it's successful, the system will display a success message to the company employee, and then the company employee can view that the type of leave has been successfully requested. So in here, nothing has gone wrong. If something does go wrong, this is where you put in your exception path. So you need to, at any point or any of these steps, something could go wrong, and you need to indicate how the system should handle that. So if we look at this particular step here, the system checks the leave balance. What if there's not enough balance based off the leave type that's selected here, in this case, annual leave? Then what should the system do? Should it ignore it? Should it allow the user to proceed? What should it do? In this case, the system displays an error message to the user informing them that they don't have any leave balance, and then the use case ends. So that's where one of the ending points would happen, or the post conditions. So you can see that the leave request is cancelled because there's insufficient leave balance. So because it's a failure point and the user can no longer achieve this goal of requesting leave, that's why it has to end, and that's why it's a post condition. So your exception paths are anything that can go wrong based off any of the steps in your main flow or happy path. So again, your happy path is anything, all the different steps that a user and system goes through in order to achieve the goal of requesting leave. And if anything goes wrong along the way, then it goes into this exception path. And you need to be able to clearly label that, oh, at step, let's say 4 or 4A, if there's insufficient leave balance, this is how the system responds. If you had something here where the system failed to, let's say, log the leave request, that would be another exception path. So when the system attempts to log the leave request and now they fail, we would have another exception path here called 9A, and we would have what we call it. We log the leave request. So we would call it something like fails to log the leave request, and then you would indicate what the system should do. The system in that case might actually present a error message to the user, but say something like try again or please try again in a few seconds or some sort of wording like that. But it gives the user, oh, okay, that's what I need to do. It's informing the user that something has gone wrong, and this is how the system is responding. So this becomes really important when you get into specific scenarios that the system needs to be able to handle, and the development team will want this information from you. So you need to define what is the main things that the user and system goes through. What are the different paths that a user can go through to achieve the same goal? And then what can actually go wrong? With the different paths, again, this can occur from any of these steps, but it's normally from a user perspective. So if there was, let's say when they select a particular type of leave, then they need to upload, in this case, a jury duty leave letter. So because this is actually different to the flow here, we need to indicate again how the system should respond. So if the user or the company employee chooses a jury duty leave type, then the system displays an option to upload a jury service letter. The user selects to upload. The user navigates to where the letter is stored on their local computer. They select the file to upload, and then they can go back to this happy path step 6. So after they've done all of these steps, how does it then feed back into the main flow or the happy paths? So you need to, now this isn't always the case. This could say use case ends if it doesn't actually go here. But when you select the file to upload, it's going back to step 6 because maybe they need to input some details, and then they go through selecting to request leave, attempting to log the leave request, and so on and so forth before they get to the successful message. So all depends on what the user flow is here, the user system flow here. And if there's any alteration or any different path that a user needs to take to achieve this same goal, then you indicate it here via a description, and you map out how this system and user interaction is in this particular path, and then how it aligns back to the main flow. Okay. Do we have time for this? I just want to be conscious of time. What time is it? It's 8 o'clock, Dave. What do you think?
Yeah, we can take the activity.
Okay. So we're going to be using the same mirror boards.
Okay.
And we're going to try split out one of the use cases that we've defined in our previous activity.
Yeah.
And we're going to map out all of the different things that we need to be able to achieve, like the purpose. So like the goal of the use case, how it begins, how it ends. We have our actors already.
Yeah.
What must be true before the use case starts? What is the main success and failure to be handled? And then what are the different steps that a user and system will go through? So this is just to give you an idea of kind of how a use case would look when it's broken down into its specific details. And we're going to use the book appointment use case as an example.
Okay. So how many minutes do you want me to assign to that?
Well, is everyone comfortable staying on? Because I know it is, I think it's reached the top of the hour. So I know people are probably, they probably do want to drop off, but it was a lot to get through today.
Yeah. Should we do 10?
What do people think? Are you happy to
All right,
continue,
guys.
or do you
How
want to
many
have a
minutes
Q&A?
should we? Yeah, Amira, I can see your reaction. Any other person, just drop it in the comment section. Let's have your response. Or do you want to stop it here? We don't mind anyways. If you want us to stop it here, it's fine. Okay. All right, please unmute your mic. Let me hear from you, Babalola.
Well, let's continue, does it? Let's continue.
So Babalola is speaking for himself. He said we should continue. Abiodun is saying, okay. Mike here, let's continue.
I have a question, please.
All right, please go ahead
After
before.
this exercise, is there time to ask questions? Because there's a lot of information and I definitely need some clarifications.
Yeah, I think like if we want to open it up to Q&A instead
Okay.
of doing the exercise, because that exercise will take probably about 20 minutes. But yeah, I'm open to Q&A if you guys feel that's better.
Yeah, I would say we should just go to Q&A, since we've already done an activity, right? So just to have the chance to, cover different aspects. Yeah.
So speaking of Q&A, Khadija, your hand was up initially. Do you want to ask the
Yeah.
questions now?
Yes, please.
Please go on.
Thanks. Thanks, David. So I have this scenario. How do you represent a use case where there is ants of? I'm giving an example. So I'm currently on a project where you have to ant up a data to an outsourced system who does the processing and then add it over. So for example, you have from the internal system, you have like extract files and then submit files. Submit files is going into the other use case, the outsourced system. Being out of the business, the outsourced system would process, do all sorts, and then upload back, where we then download and then distribute. So how do you represent the use case in that kind of situation?
So when you say use case, do you mean just the user type and goal, or do you mean
Okay,
the
so
details
for
of use
internal
case?
system, for my internal system, I have a system boundary. I have the actors under the use case that shares extract, submit. Once you submit, the way I represent, I just want to know if this is right. So for the external system, I have to draw another use case beside the business use case, which shows submit, and then there's a like an arrow linking to the body of the system, not going inside since it's an external system. And so the question is, am I supposed to show the use case outside the organization? Because I know the process that's going to take place outside the organization before uploading back to us and then downloading. How do you represent that?
So that the process that takes place outside the organization, they're not actually going to interact with the internal system?
No, there's no integration, no. So basically handing over the files and then processing the external, the outsourced system would process the files. Process be like calculate, submit. So that's an example of the use case: calculate, submit, and then training, then upload back into the business where we download the files. So my question is, how do you represent the answer of how do you show that in the use case?
So would it be correct that one of the prerequisites for that process that happens externally, would that feed into one of the use cases that are within the system?
Yes.
I would say then that like that process would be like a precondition or like a prerequisite for that use case to kick off. So if I think you mentioned something submit. So if that external process hasn't happened, then that use case submit can't start.
Yeah,
So
I understand the preconditions. I understand that. My question is actually representing it using the system boundaries and the use case.
I wouldn't include it in the usual use case diagram because it's not a particular user that needs to interact with that solution. It's a process that needs to happen outside of the system that then triggers a use case to occur or start.
Okay, so am I supposed to show these two system boundaries? Like I have my own boundary. Am I supposed to have another boundary for the external system?
No, unless it's two separate systems and there's two different users that are using those two separate systems, I wouldn't do it that way. If that's a process that kicks off, that actually triggers a use case to start, then in your use case diagram, you would just have your system boundary box, your use cases inside it, and then your different actors that interact with those use cases.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Quite confusing. All right.
It's
Thank you.
confusing.
It is.
Right.
It is. Yeah, because it's confused. Why it's confusing is once I hand over the files I know the process that takes place before the processes on the file before submitting back into the business. So when I'm capturing my use case, or when I'm describing the as is, the looking the gherkins, I want to say, oh, I want to submit the file, probably as an administrator, I want to submit the file to this so that they can process it. So I know the use case there. So representing it, the diagram is, well, don't let me take up your time. Thank you so much.
No, no, you're fine. Like, I think it's a great question. And I would see that being as a precondition that before this use case can start, this process has to execute. Because if it hasn't, then the use case is not going to work. If I'm understanding that correctly, it seems like a process from an external system needs to happen before a particular goal or use case within this system
No,
can
no.
start.
So the process starts from the internal system, and then you're handling over the data to the external system to process it, and they're handling it back to the business.
Oh,
After
okay, so it's
processing.
like it starts here, goes there, and then it
Yes,
comes back.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I would say like that one use case, so that's still the goal. What's that the process that starts within the internal system? What's that called?
That extract. You extract
Extract?
file, yeah. You
Extract
extract
file.
file,
Okay.
yes. You
Okay, so
extract file and then submit work. You
the
submit to the external system.
goal of that extract file use case is what?
They go to extract and validate.
Validate what?
Yeah, extract to consolidate all the files. Once you extract, you're consolidating all the files.
Hmm.
And then so it's a payroll system. You're consolidating all the file, handling it over to the external system to do all the calculations and then add it back to the business.
Okay, well then in that case, if this other system over here is doing its own set of use cases, I would have one use case diagram for
Yeah.
the, let's say, system A with all
Yeah.
the different goals that they need to do, and then
Yeah.
have another one for system B and all the use cases that needs to do. Because if one of them there is extract file, and then
Yeah.
that triggers a use case in system B, then
Yes.
you can show the
The
interaction
linking.
there. Yeah.
Okay, so two system boundaries, right?
Yeah, two separate ones. Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't understand that
Yeah,
at the start.
that was what I did. I just needed to be sure that's the right one to do.
Yeah, and look, I would say as well, like there's no perfect way of doing it. Once your stakeholders understand what you're trying to get across in terms of the requirements, that's the main thing. Like I've done BPM and diagrams before, not using the right symbols, but I've had to dumb it down for people to make it easy for them to understand. So once you're giving them the right information and they can say, "Oh yeah, I'm on the same page," then that's the goal. It's to get our stakeholders on the same page and to make sure it is easy to understand. Because if we start trying to make it very complicated, and like when you get into like use case diagrams as well, you have different kind of extensions that you can do within a use case. So a use case can go from one to another. It just gets very complicated, but keep
Yeah.
it simple. Try to keep it simple.
All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
All right, thanks, James. Benjamin, your hand is up. I'm gonna take one more question after this, then we can continue. Benjamin, please ask a question.
Yes, I was going to ask, thank you, James, for the presentation so far. Its use case, is this fully waterfall documents, artifacts, or is it applicable to waterfall and Agile? How is it used differently in Agile as compared to waterfall?
So I would say like it depends on the culture of your company and probably the industry that you're in. It's not use cases just for one particular like agile or waterfall. I've used it in both contexts. I use it a lot in agile, but because we're trying to develop things fast and trying to move at a fast pace, I use a different approach for when I'm defining the use cases there. In terms of I define use cases like the goals first and the different types of users, but then I take each use case and incrementally kind of break down the details as I go through the likes of like sprints and sprint planning and all that kind of stuff. In a waterfall way, you might do more of a upfront analysis where you're getting all of your use cases, but you don't move on into the design or development stage until you have all of the details mapped out for each of those specific use cases. So if you have one for book appointments, you have one for reschedule appointments, you have one for cancel appointments, you would take each one of those, break out all of those details that we went through, like the purpose, the starts when, the ends when, the precondition, the postcondition, the happy flow, the alternate path, the exceptions, and anything else that needs to be included in there before you actually go to developing or designing the solution for that. Where in an agile way, you're taking it incrementally and you're breaking it down bit by bit in like chunks. Does that answer
Okay.
your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Thank you, James. So Coco Sugar is asking, would it be possible to use a process map to visualize the happy, alternate, and exception pathways you showed us earlier?
Yes, absolutely. So Coco, one way to visualize the happy flow and the alternates and the exceptions is to use process modeling. So when you get to like your user story stage, you can take all of this information and you can actually create loads of different types of visuals. And one of them is the process flow. So I love creating a process flow because you can show if there is like a, let's say there's an alternate path, you would have a decision point. And then one path goes to one way, another path goes to another way. And then your exception, you might have your alternate path lead into your exception, depending on the way your flow is. But yeah, I think that that is one of the best ways to model the actual user system interaction. And a swim lane diagram will probably be good because you can see this is the user or the user group, and then this is the system. And you can see the kind of the interaction between them visually.
Okay. Um, so James, should we wrap up here or can we take the activity?
Yeah, look, guys, I'm happy to stay. This has been a trial for this is my first community workshop, so I really appreciate you giving feedback, one, and sticking with me. I hope you, if you're not staying on, because I'll stay here as long as you like. Well, not as long as you like, but I'll stay for the next
Yeah.
like 20 minutes or so. If anyone wants to stay on, but I hope you took something away from this. It's really when you're starting with use cases, it can get very kind of tricky, but just try to keep it simple. That's what I always try to say. Think of your actor as a user. Think of your goal as like a need of that user. And when you try to drill down into the details, then you do it incrementally. Like, don't just try to do all together because it's just going to be very difficult. Start off with your purpose. What is the actual goal? Then how does it start? How does it end? Maybe go to your happy flow, map out, how you think to use a system interaction, because as well, these can be used for wireframes. And you can see then how wireframes align with the user flow, and then how the system needs to respond. Like if they need to present like an error message, what does that look like? What's the wording of that? And then you can also have business rules on top. But that like there's a whole load of kind of different techniques that you can use to define the use cases. But the thing is just to make sure that you're thinking from a user point of view and what the user needs and not what the user wants. So I really appreciate sticking with me through the session. I know it's been long, but thanks so much.
Okay. All right. Can we appreciate James? But if you want to stick around, we're gonna create another breakout room and take the activity, then we call it a wrap. Okay. All right. So we have I'm gonna do 2 rooms, 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, that should be enough.
Okay. So let's get that on. Okay. All right. So rooms are in session. 20 minutes. You can join your room now.
Where did that come first? Or the others doesn't matter?
Login. I think login first. That's about it first.
If you're an existing patient, would you have to register?
No.
No. Okay. And register for new patients.
Type of user.
Yeah.
I think you're the existing customer patients.
So you can say this is beginning when the existing patient has logged in. So that's something that the system then can validate because they can check, oh, is this patient actually logged in?
Okay.
And then if you were doing the one for the new patients, let's say maybe before they book an appointment, they have to actually set up an account or sign up. Then you could say that the precondition for book appointment is that a new patient has signed up or that the new patient sign up or registration has been like successful or approved. Because just because you sign up doesn't mean they're actually going to become a patient. Probably has to go through a whole process. But that's just an example of how one use case can feed into another. Okay, and then we want to look at how does the use case end? So what is the particular thing that happens when an existing patient has booked an appointment?
They receive a confirmation email that their appointment has been successfully booked.
Perfect. Yeah. And then to make this even more clear, if someone's just reading that, you can put in the existing patients receive the confirmation that appointment has been successfully booked.
I guess, do we need to specify what medium or that's not needed?
Say again, sorry?
Do we need to specify what medium they're getting the confirmation?
No. So if you start going into that, that's you're jumping to solution mode. But you just need to know that the existing patient needs to receive some sort of confirmation. And as a team, you can agree: is that like email? Is it SMS? Is it what is it? What way do they receive that confirmation? But for this, you don't need to, unless it's very like if you only could handle email, for example, you couldn't do SMS, then you could put it in there. But I would say try keep it as generic as possible because you don't want it too solution specific. So the actors, you have your user as your existing patient. You just need to identify what is the system that user is interacting with. And when we think of system, we want to keep it very generic. So we could call it something like the like GP appointment system or like GP booking system, something like that. So based off your existing patient, that's going to be your user. And then your GP appointment booking system is your actual system. So let's start defining the happy paths. So these are the main steps that the user goes through and how the system behaves without anything going wrong. So we want to, let's say we've just logged in. Actually, because we have logged in, our begins, because we're saying we need to log in, so that's how the use case begins. We need to have that as our first step in our happy flow. So we can just put like number one, the user has logged, or user selects login. So you're always trying to think of what is the user trying to do, and then think of like actions. Like if you were looking at like booking a flight, what are the steps that you go through in order to book a flight? So this context, you're looking at what are the steps that the user goes through for booking an appointment, and while the user is going through those steps, how should the system behave, or how should the system handle what the user is trying to do? So let's say they've logged in. Now, what do they do if they want to book an appointment?
Switch for flights.
So this is in the context of booking an appointment.
Select the type of appointments.
Like, say again, sir?
Select the type of. Sorry, go ahead. Check for availability.
Yeah, check for availability. Yeah.
Do we need to select the type of appointment first?
So if you're reading this, and let's say we step through this as like a process flow. So the user selects login, then availability. Is that second step, who is performing the action? Is it a user or is it the system?
The user. User is going to check for availability, then select available dates.
So probably before you can check for availability, you probably have to select the type of appointments.
Yeah.
Or maybe select to book an appointment. And then you could say, like, so when the user selects the type of appointment, maybe this is where the system should do something.
System will
That's when the
display.
system generates the available appointment.
Yeah, system will display the date. Yeah.
I'm thinking, can the system also display dates?
Available appointments.
Does anyone hear me?
Available dates.
Yes, like dates, date or time for the appointment as well.
Okay, so now that we can see the available dates, what would happen next?
Select dates. User select the dates. Preferred one.
User choose.
And then user receive system sends confirmation.
What about the time?
Yeah, user select the dates and then user select the time.
Select the date and time.
You could have something here when the user selects a date that the system checks available time slots based off that selected date.
Yeah. Okay. 5.
Because one of your things that could go wrong when we get to the exceptions is if there's no time slots for that selected date, then the system needs to show something to the user, or it needs to inform them in some shape or form. So here you're stepping through, and this is when nothing goes wrong. So the user selects a preferred date, and the system shows the time slots for that selected date, and then what should happen?
Okay, then I think after
Confirm if you want that
after the
date.
selection of dates, then the system should be able to give a feedback saying if the date is available, but maybe you can send a notification to a consultant.
Select the time slot.
Please, do you get me?
Is this making sense so far, or was it a lot to kind of take in? Because you can see the user and system kind of interaction, and like someone said in the chat, if you model this in a process flow, it's very easy then to catch gaps, or that doesn't make sense because I'm saying the user needs to select something there, but the system hasn't displayed anything. So you can use it as like a analysis technique to be able to go through to verify, does this make sense? User does this, system does this, user does this, and so on and so forth. Okay, so they've selected a time slot that is available. Now, what should happen?
System confirm booking.
Maybe system attempts to book the time slot. Because if it fails, or if it succeeds, it will do something. But if it fails, it will also do something.
Should that be 7?
Yeah, so system attempts to book time slot, and then when it has succeeded, let's say, what would be the next one?
Send a confirmation.
Yeah.
Send confirmation to patient.
And then your step has to align.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
All right. So we are back here. We have 20 minutes, and I hope we're able to do and also learn at the same time. So, James, can you hear me?
Yeah, I was on mute.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry.
Right. So I'm gonna stop sharing, then you can take over. So just wrap it up. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. How did you guys find that? Difficult?
A lot more of a breakdown than one would think at first.
Mm-hmm. But can you see how the use case, like the user and the goal, fits into now how you break down into the details, like of the main flow and what could go wrong?
Yes.
Yeah, it is a lot to take in. So thanks so much for staying with me. like use case scenarios, I would say they're a little bit tricky to get at the start, but when you do figure out, oh, this is the user, they need to do this, this is how the system should behave based off whatever the user's doing, it becomes so much easier. So the more that you practice doing them, this session wasn't going to give you weren't going to come away and be like, oh, I can completely write an effective use case, but it gives you the idea of how to go about writing an effective use case and the scenarios and what you need to think about in terms of the different things, the breakdown of details, where you should start, the different types of approaches, the techniques, and then how that all kind of comes in as working in kind of in a tandem. So thanks so much, guys, for taking the time to spend with me this evening. I know we went well over, so I appreciate it sticking around. But if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and ask any follow-up questions, please feel free. But thanks so much, and I hope you took something away from the session that you can use then in your work.
Yeah, thank you. Let's keep that coming. I can see reactions. People are happy. They were able to. You added value to us. Thank you for coming to the community. I just dropped James Andu, so you can connect with James on LinkedIn and also see what he's doing out there. So thank you, everyone. We've come to the end of today's session and to the end of February Summit. So if we have any communication for you, you can get that on the community. Please join the community, follow our social media handles, share on your LinkedIn profile, and tag Dobac. Let's know what resonated with you today. All right. So we see you some other time. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a lovely evening.
Yes, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.